he's saying to his son, sometimes all you need is 20 seconds of insane courage.
Brilliant. Yeah.
All you need. And it's once you get going, and it's just to build
Yeah.
up that energy to take that first step, it's much easier once you've got the momentum.
Welcome to the Brand Stars podcast. If you're a visionary woman with a message to share, and you're already the face of your brand, but would love to become the star of your brand, then you're in the right place. I'm Naomi Estmont, longtime personal branding photographer, videographer, trainer, and creator of the online Brand Stars Academy. I host inspiring guests on this podcast, each an expert in their own field. And we all share a passion for helping our fellow women to shine our light and share our brilliance in the world even more brightly. So that's the golden thread goal of each episode. Let's dive in. Enjoy.
Special welcome to Talana Simpson, my wonderful guest today. Thanks for joining us, Talana.
Thanks for having me. This is fun, yeah.
I'm very excited for everything that you have to share, and I'm sure all of you who are watching, whether you are with us live or watching the replay, Talana has a ton of fabulous insight and inspiration to share with you that I think you're going to find pretty fascinating. Talana is a podcaster, as you may have guessed from the title of our chat, and her podcast is called Let's Talk Communication, which is wonderful, and she speaks all about or introduces conversations that count, which is a really special topic in the world and all to do with helping all of us actually live our lives better. Is that right, Talana?
Yes, that's all part of it.
All part of it, and to live more courageously and more bravely and shine our light more brightly, which is something that is very close to my heart too. And she is a courage coach and an author. She's coaching its executives and entrepreneurs and individuals. Talana, am I right?
That's right, yes.
That's right, and helping them to have conversations that count. So really finding their authentic ways of communicating and expressing themselves and their potentials. And just finally, you are also a rock climber, a Tajia, and a milkshake lover.
I do enjoy milkshakes, yes.
Wonderful. So I'm sure a lot of people can relate to any or all parts of this little intro. So Talana, thanks again so much for joining us. And may I ask you to kick off by sharing a bit about your journey and what has led you to do these things that you do now?
I think I've always had an interest in helping people. I remember when I was really small, I wanted to be a nurse, and then it was transformed to a doctor. I didn't quite make the grades, so I decided to study a science degree that would help me get into medicine. And I did science, or the body, so the sciences and psychology. And when I found my first interview in psychology, that was just that was it for me. The medicine went out the window, and the focus on the mind came in, and I got a background then in the physiology, how our body works, as well as how the mind works. And that eventually led me to coaching. So that's, I suppose, how I got to be a coach today. But part of the area around courage coaching is quite particularly in terms of in the communication side. It's always been, I think, a challenge for myself. And they always say, like, if you want to learn something, that's what you should teach as well. Or, it's turn into the area I specialize in. I used to blush uncontrollably, be very shy, not be able to speak up, and I hated conflicts. So it was very difficult to put up boundaries, and that to such an extent that I actually experienced an illness that affected my thyroid, which is all in how you communicate and present yourself in the world. So in my journey to wellness, I've had a number of coaches and mentors and my wellness team, I call them. But through that whole journey, I had to learn a lot more about how to present myself in the world in a way where I can still be courageous. I can still take risks, but with not ignoring the fear that's related to it. And as well as learning how to put up boundaries, how to, improve my relationships, how to deal with conflict, those difficult conversations are really, really important, but again, in a way where it is a healthy way. And I'm happy to say I'm very healthy now. I have no more normal health challenges like I used to, and really have come to the place where I think communication is one of the most important things. It's kind of like the foundation to so much. How we talk to ourselves influences how you feel in that day, how you talk to the people close to you and engage, how you're able to get your message across and also understand someone else is all part of how we relate to each other. And it's everything we do is with and through people. Life is not the same. I mean, I'm sure people are experiencing it now with this isolation and in lockdown. It's just not the same. We still want to connect and communicate with people, so we're finding ways online, any way we can to keep that going. So it's such a really vital skill. That it's really and from my own journey, being able to now share what worked for me, what I've learned about it, but also then I suppose the skills from psychology, understanding the mind body psychology, and then coaching in particular is really facilitating people on their own journey, so that if they need a bit of theory, I can provide the theory on how to improve communication, but also understanding that I call it the structure, the way we are the way we think about conversations and how we, because there's so much like the foundation in order to have these important conversations is a level of confidence and courage. And it's linked to esteem and confidence in that. So it's all of that together really is, I suppose, I don't know, that gives you a bit of sense of how I got to be where I am now.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Talana, and thank you for sharing that so vulnerably and sincerely. And I just want to also quickly say hi to our person who has joined us and is waving at us, but I can't see their name.
Hello.
So I think they are in our group. I think that's why I can't see their name. Please let us know who you are, and hello back to you. Thanks for joining us. Talana, that's really interesting, and thank you again for sharing that. And I think many people can relate, and certainly I can, to the challenge of developing your confidence. And I have shared often in my course as well, and in many other circumstances on our chat, on your podcast, with regard to myself having had a squint. I think I spoke about it there, and really struggling with my confidence. And because my whole way of interacting with the world was either to look freaky or geeky for decades. And we're so caught up in the way that we are perceived. And so it's fantastic to be able to work through that, and almost a gift in disguise, in a sense, to have an opportunity to kind of almost have to, in a way. But wonderful that you did. And I love that you mentioned also the thyroid scenario and how that manifested, like even in an illness. And wonderful that you've overcome that too and transcended that. That's fantastic. Because I also see that so much with people struggling on video and on screen like this, but really to speak out and in public, and especially women. I don't know if you see that more with women, but we weren't really, many of us, certainly in my age group, we're not brought up to be, really confident and outspoken. So it can be a challenge. So fantastic that you're doing that work with people.
Yeah, thank you. I feel very privileged to do that.
Wonderful. And have you, with regard to the conversations that count, so I know we had one, well, I shared one with you on the podcast. Have you got an example of something similar to that, just to give us an idea of what you mean by conversations that count and how they can really enhance our relationships, which enhances everything with regard to the way the way we are in the world?
Absolutely, because I really believe it's those conversations that count, and that shift things forward. If you can have that conversation constructively, something is going to move. Expand, grow, develop, take a step forward. The one other part is just because my example I thought of was related to podcasting, because that's what we're going to talk about. So I thought just to mention a bit about how maybe the story behind how I got into podcasting. Part of my journey then in knowing that communication is so important is, if I want to now, get my message out there, I need to learn how to present my message and get it across. So podcasting, or there's a number of ways I've been practicing, like on video, getting myself in front of audiences, as I said before, I used to absolutely blush, go bright red, and now that hardly ever happens. And if it does, I actually just laugh it off. It's not nothing like what it used to be. But my point is more is I've spoken now in front of hundreds of people at a time, and it's just such a different experience nowadays. But I think I'm getting off track. So the podcast side was. How do I develop the skill of getting a message across in a short time frame that I need to, because that I think is part of podcasting, is knowing what message you want to get across and having the skill, whether you're interviewing someone or you are just talking free, to get your message across to the person so they understand it and can use it and be with it. So the podcasting was, for me, one, it was to learn that skill, and secondly, it was also to just practice. I think you've mentioned a number of times in your courses, the only way we develop confidence is by practicing. You have to get in front of the camera. You have to do whatever it is you want to become confident in. There's no other way. And we could go more in detail if you wanted to at some point. But so the podcasting was that. So when I started podcasting, I should have actually looked up the year. It's at least 7-8 years ago. It's quite a while.
Wow.
It was very, very new. And I actually was at a networking event, and I met a guy there who I found out he did podcasting. I'm like, please, I need you to tell me, how does the tech work? How do we do this? And he's like, well, he was actually he was a pioneer himself, or still is, but in those days they were trying to develop a network. And that's where I inherited the name Let's Talk. It was called the Let's Talk Network, and his show was the Let's Talk Geek. And he said the best way is to, come and have a show, like give it a go, but be a guest first. So I got to get to be a guest on his show, got to understand it, and then he had some criteria. I had to have a co-host if I was going to be on the network, and we had to do a show every week.
Wow.
It had to be the same time, because he's trying to develop like a network. So I went and I asked one of my close friends at the time if he would be interested in being my co-host, and he was, and it was great. Like we got on really well. And the first couple of shows were, there's lots of learnings in that. But it got to a point, a couple of months maybe into it, where he wasn't then pulling his weight. So this is where it gets to my conversation that counts.
Okay.
I felt I was doing, because there's a lot of prep beforehand to find guests, to understand what you're going to ask them, prepare your how you're going to present, because you've got a certain time frame to get a message across. All the tech stuff you need, the photo, the bios that go with because we would record the show live, so we would stream it as well. Mm-hmm. And after that, we'd sit in the studio and do the editing, upload it overnight. The next day it would be published, for the podcast. But that meant you had to have all the prep ready on the night of your show. So he wasn't pulling his weight. So part of the conversation account was to confront him on it, to say, like, this is not working for me. I'm doing all the work. You just, stepping up and getting the glory kind of thing, coming at the last minute, not asking me, like, okay, who's our guest tonight? And it's just, it wasn't bringing the quality and so I had to ask him, like, what's going on for you? Like, this is how I feel. What's going on for you? Do you want to be part of it? Like, it's no hard feelings either way, but if you want to be part of it, you need to step up. If you don't, it's okay. And so part of having that conversation was also just first, when we started the conversation on the phone, it was just to check, is this a good time? We need to talk about the show and your involvement in it. And he said that time was fine. So then I carried on. Because I'd already prepared. Part of having a good conversation is preparing yourself for what he's going to say. So I explained my side, and then asked him. Like, I didn't accuse him of anything or say you're not interested. It was more, what's going on for you? Because it looks like you're not interested. That's the story I'm telling myself. That's my assumption from your involvements. And he actually didn't know. He said, you actually need to think about it. I'm like, well, that's fine. How long do you need? So he said, give me a week, and he'll give me an answer. Either way, he'll either commit fully or but he just wasn't sure in that moment.
Mm.
And I think it was obviously in the back of my mind, he wasn't sure, and that was what plays out in the way he engaged with the behavior. So actually, it was within a couple of days he contacted me and said he's actually feels it's not what he wants to do. It's not, he can't do it long term. So it's quite sad that unfortunately I lost my co-host. But for me, it was far more important. That's why I call it a conversation that counts. It counted that something had to change.
Yes.
He either had to step in or he had to step out. It wasn't, we couldn't go on because I would have just resented it. It would have impacted our friendship and things like that. So it counted for me. It wasn't necessarily the outcome I wanted and was hoping for.
Yeah.
But it was an outcome that allowed me to go forward. I actually then found 4 other co-hosts, because then I realized it's a lot of work, way more committed. But if they only had to do 1 show a month, it might work better.
Wow.
So that was the next iteration of the show, and was I had
4
other
co-hosts. Wow. That's brilliant, Talana. Thank you for sharing that story. And I relate, first of all, on the level of preferring to avoid conflict, because that's me too. And I think I shared with you in our session, because we spoke about a conversation that counts there, that
Yes.
I'm a 9 on the Enneagram for all the coaches watching. I know you all understand that. And the 9 is the adaptive peacemaker. So harmony is very high on our values. So yeah, so it can be challenging to, like you say, approach conflicts. And I love the way you explained how to do that with preparing and knowing, you know, the outcome that you wanted, and giving him the opportunity to be open to explaining, you know, how he's feeling and his side of the story. And then to go on to have 4 co-hosts, that's also brilliant. And kudos to you for getting going with podcasting, you know, right at the beginning. Because now, in my sense, I don't know about you and all of you watching, but I think I get an email almost every single day in my inbox, either inviting me to listen to a podcast or to get podcast training or to join a podcast directory. It just seems to have exploded lately. But amazing that you got into the game. And I mean, I really think it can be one of the best ways to expand our audience, or reach a wider audience, put it that way. And especially, like you say, though, when it's considered and you've decided, you decide up front and you do the planning to prepare your content like that so that you are delivering value. And I love how you explained that. So for any people who think maybe watching, who may be thinking of hosting a podcast, or maybe even have started and would like some more tips, have you got a few more tips for us from that perspective with your wealth of experience?
Yeah, and if there's anyone that's got questions, you just need to, pop them in the chat there, because that would help. But the primary thing, the tip I would say is about audio.
Oh, brilliant.
Video is, if you think about it, just with podcasts are mostly audio. There's a big upturn, upswell now, or interest in video. Video, especially I think with lockdown in our country, in South Africa. Video has grown. We're much more comfortable now with it, but we've had so many bandwidth issues, that video is only now catching up to the rest of the world. But I mean, there was one amazing interview I did about some guys who do animation, and we had a technical issue setting up, and I kept asking, because we had the 4 co-hosts, as well as we called it a mixer role. Someone was behind the scenes who adjusted the cameras on who was speaking, and would listen to the sound and make sure the microphones were working. We couldn't get the microphones to work. I think only one worked. And I kept asking, are you ready? Is it done? And there's another example of a conversation, someone who was too scared to say to me, no, I can't, I don't know how to fix this. This is not working. So he eventually just said yes. And we recorded the whole show with 1 microphone. You could hardly hear my guests.
Yeah.
And the video was great, but it's useless without sound. So my main point of podcasting is try as best as you can to get your best sound, and obviously encourage your guests to have the best sound. You can always see it. People don't mind so much about the video, but if you can't hear what the person's saying, that's how you lose. I mean, you lose a big chunk of information then.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's
So
very valid.
just to remember that how important sound is. And then
Absolutely. No, I was just going to
other,
say it's so important for video on all aspects, and so often people think, they're close enough to the microphone, it's fine, but people very much underestimate ambient noise, and also just that lack of clarity of having the microphone. And I love that when you invited me onto your podcast, you also gave me some guest instructions or guest guidelines just to advise me and just to check that I have the right tech, the microphone and the headphones, so that we can, especially for yes, exactly. So very good point. Yeah, thank you. And I've got my microphone sitting over here, and I'm sure you have one also, which is very helpful.
I need to get a bit more jacked up, so I'm actually using this microphone. But
it's using that one. Okay.
It's not too bad. It's working.
Yeah, not too bad.
As I said, I'm between houses with this lockdown, so I'm busy still setting up.
We've just got a question. Shall we answer this question quickly, Talana, from Dorette? Hi, Dorette. Thank you for joining us. So Dorette asks, would a lapel microphone work as well? It's actually called a lavalier. So we use the lapel microphones a lot, Dorette, when we're filming people like a public speaker, for example, on a stage. And the wonderful thing with that, so with the lavalier, so the one we use has got two sections. So it's a little receiver box that goes on top of the video camera, and then there's a transmitter box that has got a microphone that gets attached over here somewhere on the speaker, and then the box can go in their pocket or what have you, and that works brilliantly for that. Talana, I'm not so much sure with regard to using that for a podcast.
Yeah, I've never seen it used for a podcast because, and it might still, as long as your input of the microphone is going into whatever the technology is that you are recording with.
Yes, that's it.
Today we're using our laptops and we're using StreamYard to record this conversation. So however you are recording it, your microphone needs to connect with that, if that's so.
Yes. So for example, Dorette, to explain it in a bit more detail, so I've got a microphone next to me, but the microphone is actually plugged into the little headphone jack on my laptop. And this is a little, because I'm filming myself on my laptop, so exactly as Talana's explaining, but it's a little tricky on mine because my laptop only has one little jack for the headphones. So it doesn't have a separate microphone jack. So what I've got is an extra little, it's called a splitter. So it's a little wire, plugs into my headphone jack, and then it splits, and I plug one end into my headphones and one end into my microphone. So that's where it gets a little technical. So Talana, otherwise with you could just have plugged, I could have done the same actually. I could have just plugged this directly into my headphone jack, and then I could use this. It's back to front. I always get confused. So this microphone, because I could just as easily have done that.
Yeah. And I've got one, I think you showed it last time, it's a tiny little microphone that can plug into your camera, because I have, before lockdown, I would try, if I could, to meet the guest in person.
Oh,
and
lovely.
There was one, I interviewed Brand Pretorius, amazing guy around leadership. And we actually met, to find a place to meet was in the hotel, but the hotel lobby was too noisy. So we went outside.
Yes.
And I used my phone. So you don't need a lot of technology to record. If you're going to stream, you're going to need internet at that time and this. But a lot of the podcasts, if you're not streaming live, I often use my phone. And what I did is actually drove on my scooter to this place. I ended up having to balance the camera, my phone in my little stand on my helmet to get us both in the view and with this little microphone to balance that between us. But those tiny things are very powerful, but they're much more powerful than just relying on the microphone of the camera.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And especially if you're outside, because it's amazing how much even a breeze can sound like a gale almost. And yes, that's correct. So I had that little goodie. and it plugged into my cell phone with that ending. So that's what goes into the headphone jack. Yeah. So that's great. So you were able to then just sort of point it for you and him, or put it between you.
Yeah, just mine is even smaller than that, just between
Okay.
us, and it picks
Yes.
up really well. So
Nicely. Yes, and sort of filters out that noise. So, and yeah, you're right. I mean, absolutely. It's the best thing is to get started and to go for it. And like you said,
and
without waiting to have a ton of tech. Yeah.
yes, I was going to say use what you've got, and we've all
Yeah.
got a phone, and even the phone microphone is a good place to start until you can
Exactly. Yeah.
upgrade your tech as you go.
Yes, exactly. And like you say, and I mean, even I found if I'm in a quiet room, the microphone on my laptop is also very good. I mean, it
It's
can be
really good,
great
yeah.
if I don't have much, especially if you're in a room. And we actually had this conversation last week about how to get rid of your echo, and just to have your curtains, carpets, as much soft furnishings around you. And if you're in a relatively contained area, it will help a lot with your echo. But Talana, so before that question, you were going to continue with something else. Sorry.
The other tip was very much around the structure of how you lead the conversation. It was so important to learn that. I remember our very first show. So we had Tim now, who's my mentor, but also doing the tech. We went for about an hour, and at the end of the show he said, main feedback is you waffled. It was all over the show. I don't know what your point of the discussion. He says, next week you only have half an hour. You're not allowed to go longer than half an hour, and you have to get your message across. And it was the biggest learning, and such great feedback.
Yes.
And I actually learned, and I found it's called the grid system that we used to then use, especially with the other co-hosts. We had Google Docs that had the structure in it, and then it's just a way you've got to find some way, even if it's just in your head, as what is my point? So who am I speaking to? Who's the audience?
Yes.
And what am I trying to get across? What I want to teach them or get them to think about, and what action do I want them to take from this? Like, what's the point of listening to this hour or half an hour? And then from that, you then think with this person's story or their knowledge, how do I structure it in a way that would get that message across?
Yes, brilliant. And what I loved, Talana, I was just going to say, what I loved is when you invited me to be your guest on your podcast, you gave me a structure. So I guess it was along those lines, and you laid out a couple of questions so that I could think about that too and see how I could bring the best value. And your questions also related to your audience and your golden thread, the topic being the conversations that count. So I was able to prepare around that, which was brilliant, and I really appreciated that.
Yeah, and that's also that we could then in that podcast add the most value we could to anyone who listens or watches it. So so having some sense of structure, whatever way works for you, but just that prep beforehand, not just winging it. And then it's this fine dance between you don't want it to be prescriptive, that it has to be those questions in that order and almost rehearsed. That it's not about that. It's about in your back of your mind, you're understanding the message. So your questions and then what the guest gives you, you can then guide them on this journey to make sure that it's somehow get to an end point, to somehow get to.
Yes, that's brilliant. Thank you. And I love what you're saying about that. It's similar in a way to video shoots also. So important, as you say, to be concise with your message. And that's why I also often say that scripting can be amazing for a video, not necessarily to use a teleprompter and speak to a script, but to get your message down. And one of the ways possibly to do that is to use a voice recorder just on a video front, to use a voice recorder and just record your thoughts so that you get a stream of consciousness conversational tone. Obviously, with the podcast, I love what you said there too, to leave open the space for alchemy and for the dynamic and the conversation between your host and your guest.
And there's an example there is in our podcast, you drop this little gem. You just mentioned it about how you worked out your value in terms of what you charge.
Oh,
And it
okay.
wasn't part of the point of the story or that we were talking about, but I felt it was so useful. I don't know if you remember, I then brought you back to that. After you finished that
Yes,
story, I said, but now listen, you mentioned something else. Let's go back and just tell us a bit more about that. So that's, yeah, going with what's the flow. But it's still
yes.
actually all still related to the message we were trying to get across.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you, Talana. So with those, are you coming to the end of the tips for the host, or
Yeah,
because
well, there was one other quick one, was just my
yes,
as the host, your own state management, just making sure you're in your best state
yes, yeah,
possible, whether that means you get dressed up or you just make sure you got a few minutes just to send to yourself. I went through a phase where I had like a memo. I used to
yeah,
read out this, it was about 2 pages that just got me to really get into the state of
beautiful,
why I was doing this podcast and who I was trying to reach and how I knew it would help add value. And that just
wonderful,
helped me hone in myself to and really remind myself not to focus on the message and not on me and what's happening in it.
yeah, that's beautiful,
Yes,
Talana.
the
I love
low
that.
threads. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And that is so powerful for video as well. If you're going to be
Mm.
shooting a video, to really understand your own message and your audience and exactly what it is you want to say and why and how. And and also the mood, getting yourself into that mood, exactly like
Yeah.
you say, because you really need to be bringing the energy and conveying that even more on video if you're not speaking to someone. At least here we can raise each other's energy, and then
Yes.
on behalf of the people watching. But with video, you've got to bring that yourself too. So really powerful. Actually, I did a couple of audio interviews as well a couple of months back, and I sort of started each one with doing just 3 deep breaths just to kind of center myself and the guest and for the audience. And I also found that really lovely. I got really nice feedback from my guests actually saying, oh, that was so nice just to center at the beginning, especially if they were new to being on that actually wasn't a recorded video, but even on audio. Yeah, brilliant.
So those are my top tips. Yeah.
Love those tips, Talana. Really valuable. And like I say, I'm sure all of you watching have gained something from this, also for video. I have myself a little list here. I actually keep it next to my laptop for little things like checking that my awning's down outside because it's better for my lighting. Got my lighting done. And look into the camera, brighten the screen before you go on. What have I got here? Check that my mouse batteries are charged. Little things like that.
Yeah.
And my notifications are off on my phone and on my computer. Little things like that, because you forget. And there's actually quite a list of little details that can make the whole experience that much better for you and your guest and your audience. And that was a little tip actually that I think I forgot to mention it in my last session, was to actually brighten up your computer screen, because I don't know if your laptop does it, but my laptop it does like an auto brightness thing, and it goes a little less bright. Yeah, and so just before I go on live like this, then what I do is I brighten it up, and it makes a difference, even though I have lighting as well. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're looking at it, and that's what's.
Yes. And then, like you've said as well, it's always nice if your guest can send you a nice photograph so that you've got something just to promote with, and also to plan their own content. I've found that when I've been on a podcast, I like to take the time to just plan a little bit, and again, like you've said, exactly the same, to think about that audience that you're going to be speaking to, so that you can get across the best value.
So definitely, so if your host is not giving you that information, I would ask them, like, who are we talking to? What is the point of, what aspects do you want me to highlight? Because there's obviously, everyone's got such a wealth of information to share.
Yes.
And you would want, as the guest, you want to add as much value to that host. And I think it's likewise, as a host, you also want to add value to your guest, and you both want to get the most out of it. So definitely that preparation. And then I was going to say, to speak freely with that. I've had some guests where I don't know if it's stage fright, so the camera's going on and I know they've got so much information. You ask them questions and you get these short little answers. And you're like, you really feel like it's a host, you have to pull the information out of them. So it's to speak freely. That the other person we had, the early stage, I think, because we were so new, we would meet with people if we could and almost try to pre-interview them, which didn't work very well. Because sometimes then when they're in the studio, they don't answer like they did the first time because they've already told you that. So why would I tell you again? We had that conversation. So it's not, so it's not about that. But I remember the one guy when we were trying this pre-interview kind of to understand what to ask him. Whatever I asked him, he'd say, well, no, but that's in my book, or that's what I do in my training. And I eventually stopped and I said to him, as a conversation accounts, I suppose, or company, it's like, I actually can't have you as a guest if every time I ask you a question, you're going to say, come to my training, kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So that was my point, is just to give as much information as you can, but also being like succinct enough and trying to understand the question and deliver on that point as best as you can, in a way where you're getting your message across.
Brilliant.
Yeah, to share.
And I definitely, sorry, I've got my golden retriever here. He's come to bring me a present. It's what they do. I was just going to say, the practicing, it helps. It's so valuable. And I mean, I've just found that from having recorded all the videos for my course and then been on a number of different podcasts, and you really do get more and more skilled at conveying your message succinctly, like you say. And you can practice that on your own. If you're going to be on a podcast, do that. Stand in front of a mirror if you're brave enough, or even just with your phone, just record on your phone and just listen back and, get used to how you sound and get used to those, what's the word as well, for the media in particular, to have like bite-sized little jewels that you can drop in so that, like you said earlier, that the key points are coming across. So very, very valuable. Thank you for that. Awesome. So tonight I just wanted to ask you about having the 4 co-hosts, because that's interesting. Did you kind of have a theme for each person, like for each one, or how did it work?
I've done 2 shows there. The first one was the Let's Talk Possibility. And that was the show I started in that. And then as I've grown my coaching practice, I started Let's Talk Communication. I'd actually do less on the Let's Talk Possibility because I'm on my own now. The whole studio and network closed down. But there was more. I actually threw it out to the world and I said, like, audition. And I had a whole lot of people come in as a guest first. And I would interview them, see how they were on camera, how they found it, if they were happy to drive, because the studio was a bit far. It was in Centurion, which is a far drive. But things like that. And then I chose the 4 that I felt, were added value, wanted to. I had a form there to fill out why they wanted to do it, what value they would bring, why it would add value to them. Because I wanted to make sure now that they were really committed and motivated. Yes. So it was still all under the banner of Let's Talk Possibility, which is all about what's possible in this world, from people who are doing those wonderful trips where they, extend themselves physically, climbing mountains, to a guy who went to paddle in the Amazon and got shot, and how he managed to get out the Amazon, to what's happening with BE, so what ended up happening was I had a whole lot of guests that I wanted on the show, and they could choose amongst the 4 of them which were those guests they were interested in, as well as they needed to bring topics. So like the BE, one of the guys was a BE consultant, so he wanted to talk sometimes around what's possible if you do that correctly, and why what's the bigger impact. And so it was a bit of a mix from both sides, in terms of I allowed them to bring their interest as well as my
Yes.
interest, and then we try to, because if you're not interested in the topic or the guest, then it comes across.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I can just tell as you're speaking, you've got so much experience in this space. It's wonderful to listen and very inspiring. So also, I know that you are, well, I've seen some of the adventure things that you're involved in. And I just also, with the braveness and the courage, and I wanted to touch on how else do you help people to really shine and be brave and live the life they love?
So I think that the main way I do that is through the coaching. So mostly it's one-on-one coaching, and I have an online course around self-consciousness, how to help people overcome self-consciousness, considering they sometimes manifest as blushing, which was my experience. And a mastermind. So some people prefer the group format and kind of like mastermind approach, where as a group we work through a theme or towards how to create a life that people love. I started calling myself a personal coach and then a communication coach, and now it's evolved to this courage coach, because I've realized that the foundation, that what's behind us having better communication skills, is often that courage.
Yeah.
And what encapsulates courage, part of it, it's like they call it a gestalt. It's made up of a whole lot of parts, and that allows us to be more courageous. And brave is like the action of courage. So you have courage and then you act bravely.
Yeah.
And sometimes just to start a conversation that counts, you just need, I steal this from a great movie, I wrote it here, We Bought a Zoo, with
Yes.
Matt Damon on it. And he's saying to his son, sometimes all you need is 20 seconds of insane courage.
Brilliant. Yeah.
All you need, and it's once you get going, and it's just to build up that energy to take that first step. It's much easier once you've got the momentum. So developing confidence, which is part of it, true self-esteem, understanding the difference between esteem and confidence, because that is a huge shift in people, understanding what thinking styles they have that may be influencing them, whether they communicate or not, or express themselves. Just even the meanings and beliefs they have around it.
Yes.
Some people are scared of the limelight, so it's working out what's the beliefs they have around that is making it so scary.
Yes.
And they're shifting all of that. So
I'm intrigued by this, the self-esteem versus confidence. Can you give us a little insight on that?
Okay, it's definitely it's so useful to understand that our esteem is about our beingness, whereas confidence is about our doingness. If I were to just sum it up very, very simply.
Okay.
So one of my missions is to try and teach more people around this, because traditional psychology and a lot of that is they teach a conditional esteem. That you have esteem, which is related to your sense of worth, how you construct your sense of feeling valuable in this world. And if you construct it with conditions that are external to you, then you're going to have esteem that goes up and down, because up and down, up and down.
Yeah.
Because it's conditional on you meeting those conditions.
Yes.
People must like you. That's other esteem. What people think about you. Or if you do really well at work, then you have value. And that's where this idea that I've come, and I can't see it any other way, the more and more I learn about it. The unconditional esteem is true esteem, because there are no conditions. You are a human being of worth and value. We have got so much to give. We're here to add our value to the world. We don't have to do things to become a being. We're already a human being.
Yes, amen to that. Yes.
So when you get it, it's very subtle, but it's so profound, because when you get the shift and you come from, I call it the inside out, you understand you're a human being of worth and value. What you do may be good or bad, add value or not, but you yourself have value.
Yeah.
It makes it much easier to engage with the world, to speak up, to take chances, to take risks, because it's not linked to, if you fail at something, then you are not a failure. You just failed at that doing.
Yes.
And that's where confidence is a doing thing. Confidence will always go up and down.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
don't speak in front of people, you're going to be less confident. And when you more and more you speak in front of people, the more confident you'll get. So confidence is conditional on doing, and that's what you say as well with the camera. You have to get in front of a camera. The more you do it, like you said, it just gets easier. Every time you present your message, you get better at it.
So true, Talana. And what I love what you said there is that if you mess up a bit and you make mistakes, it doesn't matter because it's not affecting your being. Like you say, it's just something that you did not perfectly. And actually, sometimes it's nice to see people do things not perfectly, They make mistakes because we're all human.
And that's how you learn.
Yes,
The only way
exactly.
you're going to learn, the only way I learned about podcasting is I had some really dud shows. I had to go there and
Yeah.
in the studio and practice, and I had to get the feedback
Yeah.
of, it was awful, Talana, you only got half an hour next week.
Like, oh,
That kind of stuff.
we've all
Yeah,
had those. Yeah.
but it's useful. It was like, that's
Yeah.
feedback. There's no such thing as failure, only feedback. It's information
Yes.
that helps you fine tune your action, your behavior, your doing in order
Yes.
to improve.
While
Yeah.
you're still secure in your being, that actually
Yeah.
you have the value, but whatever you do doesn't need to be perfect. I love that. And Talana, can you give us a little also insight then into how you overcame like public speaking? Because that's also a huge fear for a lot of people. And the whole blushing thing and forgetting the words and, all of that. What did you do to actually
So
overcome
that's
it?
the start, right? Is the
Yes.
esteem of being, the
Yes.
separating your esteem from your confidence.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
it's understanding it's different, and then
Yes.
understanding that the only way you're going to get confidence in speaking is to speak. So finding
Yes.
ways to practice. I had a parrot that I inherited from my grandfather, and he passed away last year. But I
Oh,
used to practice my speeches to Dexter, the parrot. He used to sit
oh
there,
wow.
nod his head, listen to me talking to him over and over. And I
Love
could
it.
see, like, by the 20th time, he was a bit bored. He would just, But my point was more, it's the speaking, practicing it, and finding audiences and doing that. So that when you separate your confidence and your esteem, it's much easier then to start practicing. The other
Yes.
part was around the self-consciousness, because there's also it's called the spotlight effect in psychology, and actually that's what my
Yeah.
ebook is. My first
Oh,
ebook
brilliant. Yeah.
is called Consciously Shine. So it's about the spotlight effect is we have a collection of cognitive distortions, they call it.
Yeah.
So these are the ways that we filter information. We have so much information coming at us in a second that we would be overwhelmed. So our brain has a way of filtering out, ignoring some information, focusing on others, generalizing, distorting information. And some of those are cognitive biases. It's another word, bias that we have. There's nothing wrong with them. We need them to function in the world. But if you have a collection of them that function too extreme in one way, you will get a certain result. So there's a collection of biases, cognitive ways of processing information that if they all tend to work together, you will experience being very self-conscious, and you'll have this what's called the spotlight effect. So my ebook explains all of that. So, but it basically just, you feel like the spotlight's on you and everyone is looking at you
Yeah.
all the time. And it's because we are in our body all the time. We experience ourselves all the time. So of course we're going to be much more aware of what we are going through. So
Yes.
in those meetings that I would have to speak up and I would end up going blood red, is because I thought everyone is now looking at me, and obviously there's a level of judgment. There must be, and then I'm going red. So now they must be like, I can see, they all must see that I'm red. I can feel I'm red. So all my focus was on that, on my
Yes.
experience. And when
Yes.
I learned, so separating esteem and confidence, understanding that our confidence only can come from practice, and then taking the spotlight off me and
Yes.
putting it on the subject.
Okay.
What am I trying to say? Focusing, and I think you mentioned this as well in your trainings
Yes.
about presenting. When I focus on the point or the question, what they're asking me, and the content to deliver, it was no longer about me, it was about
Yes.
that. The
Yes.
spotlight's off me, the blushing
Yeah.
went. It's much easier
Yes.
then to speak. So
Brilliant.
that's a big part of it, yeah.
Big part. Thank you, Talana. And I hope all of you are watching or listening carefully to this, because this is also the thing with video, very much. And so it's a combination. We spoke about this also on your podcast. So for me, it's a combination of focusing on the topic and what you want to share, and also on
Yes.
the other person that you want to
Yes.
explain it to and help with your message. And it really, yeah, once you take that focus off yourself, you can do it, because we can only focus on one thing at a time, they say,
Yeah.
our brains. So when we're focusing on them, we're not focusing on ourselves, which is, yeah, brilliant. And I love how you've explained how, it's sort of a little more detail how that works.
Yeah, to just add one thing, because also when we focus on the other person, if you think about it, we're not sitting there judging them and
No.
scrutinizing them.
Yes.
We're interested and want to know what they say, and that's
Yes.
part of his understanding. Is people are their face may be looking at you.
Yes.
It doesn't mean they are doing what you think they're doing, which is judging you to the most
Yes.
extreme. Everybody feels like the spotlight's on them.
Exactly. So they're much more
And it
likely to
can't
be
be. There's
thinking
only one.
about themselves than you.
Yes, there's only one spotlight, so it can't be on all of us at the same time. But
Yes.
it also is to remember then that person, they're looking at you because they want to hear what you have to say.
Yes.
So focus on the message, and are they understanding you, what you get is saying?
Yes.
It shifts everything, because it's not then about what's going on inside of you. It's about what you're adding to that table, to that topic, to that.
Yeah. And I love how you've said that, because it kind of brings us full circle back to the conversations that count, and how you were explaining how it's important, that understanding of the other person, so that you can communicate better from the point of view of an understanding of each other.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Were there any other sort of core elements on that, on the conversations that count, that I might not have given you time to mention?
I think the main one just to highlight is your intention always.
Ah, yes.
What
Brilliant.
is your purpose of having this conversation? Because if you go into the conversation to prove them wrong,
Yeah.
it's not gonna get the outcome. If you
Yes.
go into the conversation to understand each other so that we can come to an agreement of some way
Yes.
forward,
Yeah.
and remembering that intention. So when it gets heated or the person gets upset, it's like, hold on, go back to my intention.
Yes.
Let me remind myself and the other person, my intention is for us to build our relationship.
Yes, exactly.
It wasn't my intention to get you upset or anything else. It's just that, because then, and if both of you want to build a relationship, then it helps that person also to step back. So intention is really important, giving the person time to prepare as well as you being prepared for it.
Yes.
So
Yes.
like I did with that first co-host is now a good time because we need to talk about your role in this, or shall we reconvene at another time?
Yes.
Allowed him to get ready. And then I think the one other thing was just your frame about these conversations. If you call it conflict, it's very different to a conversation that counts. That's why I've actually, part of my journey in this was to change the word.
Yes.
It's not about conflict and arguing, it's about discussing and having a conversation, a crucial conversation, or an important conversation.
Yes.
So your filters, the way you perceive those difficult conversations, will influence how you engage with them.
Hugely. And I mean, even just as you explain that, you can feel that it sort of relieves anxiety when you can approach it from that perspective, and instead of, I need to get my point across. And I remember having this conversation on the session with you on your podcast, and I remember how you picked up straight away, and you were saying, and I was explaining about a conversation I'd had with Dave, and you were saying, yes, you just loved how it was about the higher intention, and without sort of thinking about it, it's something that I love so much in our relationship, that we know that we have each other's best interest at heart. And it's really just that mutual highest good scenario, because what's ultimately best for me is going to be best for you, I believe. That's one of my core beliefs. But it's the point of being able to discuss it to reach that outcome for all parties.
For both of you.
Yeah, brilliant. Talana, this has been amazing. We've almost filled an hour, and I feel like I could chat to you for another hour. We're getting into the juicy stuff here. But I want to give you an opportunity to please just share with everybody who's watching how they can get in touch with you and find out more, also with regard to your ebook, but also your sessions, your coaching, and everything that you're offering.
Great. Well, the best place is go to my website, which is innercoaching.co.za. That's INNER coaching, the inside coaching. So it's really that has the everything, the course on it, the my ebook, I've got a Be Brave, Be Real, Be True, and Be You program. So there's, all the information is there. I'm also on, obviously, Facebook, Inner Coaching.
Wonderful.
You just actually Google me, you'll find me.
Your name is everywhere. I love that. I use my name too. And I just want to say, Talana, I don't know if you can see this comment. Thank you so much. I can't see who it is, but she said, I've really enjoyed this chat. Thank you. It's very difficult to do public speaking, and love the way that she's explained how to get around that. Thank you. And you know what? I mean, public speaking is one of the #1 big fears. Interestingly, there's a statistic that I share in my course, that around 77% of women are more anxious having a photo taken and posting it to public media than public speaking and going for job interviews. So we chat in the same space, Talana. We help people with the same types of fears.
Yes,
So
yes.
I love that. And thank you so much for your comment. It was Chantal. Thanks, Chantal. Okay, lovely. And Chantal is also, she has recently started a podcast too. And here's Dorette. Thank you, Dorette. So Talana, this has really been valuable. Thank you. I really appreciate your time, and it's been amazing.
Thank you for the opportunity.
We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we enjoyed recording it for you. If you did, please share this podcast with your women friends, leave us a review, and subscribe. We'll be most grateful to get the message out to more visionary women who want to become the star of their brand. And here's to you becoming the star of your brand. To help you with that, hop over to brandstarscourse.com and grab your free online course to get started. Then join us for the next podcast episode. Thank you for being part of our Brand Stars community, and have a radiant rest of your day.